But joining me now to discuss this in the studio is Head of Public Policy, a Christian Concern and Islamic Affairs expert, Tim Dieppe. And Tim, I should say at the outset, has written this great book called The Challenge of Islam, Understanding and Responding to Islam's Increasing Influence in the UK. Tim,
thank you.
Giorgia Meloni has really launched quite an ambitious response to Islamism. We should say at the outset, it's important to say, the majority of Muslims firmly disassociate themselves from radical, violent interpretations of Islamism.
Yeah.
But Giorgia Meloni, she's right. Is she to get her arms around this to really push the debate in Europe forward?
Absolutely. I've been arguing for like 9 years plus that we should ban face coverings in public, and it has been done in 20 other countries, including France, Switzerland, Netherlands, Tunisia and various other countries as well. It can be done, it should be done. I nearly gave up on it in the pandemic where we all had to wear face coverings, but we've come back from that, and they're absolutely right to do it. It's a health risk, it's a security risk, it's a safety risk, it's a barrier to communication, it dehumanises women, and it creates statuses women as kind of sexual objects that men can't possibly resist, and that kind of thing. So yes, we should ban face coverings in public places completely. I agree with that.
What about, let me just say, there are people out there who would say, actually, the sign of a liberal society is allowing people to do whatever they want, to wear whatever they want, and to affiliate with whatever religious doctrine they want to affiliate with.
There are limits to that. Polygamy is another limit, for example. We shouldn't be allowing polygamous marriages, and there are lots of, probably tens of thousands of polygamous marriages under the radar in this country. We found that Jihad al-Shami has got 3 wives, for example. We shouldn't be allowing this. One way to stop this would be to say all religious marriages should be registered. If you force religious marriages to be registered, you put a stop to polygamy, step one, that's one big win. And another thing you do is all these women, there are thousands and thousands of them who've got unregistered marriages, they'd have no legal rights if their husband divorces them or leaves them or dies. And Islamic divorce is just, I divorce you 3 times. So we need to give these women legal protection by saying these marriages should be registered in law, and then they have protection. Furthermore, 95% of Sharia council business is dealing with divorces, Islamic divorces, because they don't have their rights because it's an unregistered marriage. You would cut down, smash their business completely if you registered all these religious marriages and said it's got to be registered in law.
What about this argument, as we've seen in the papers today, the evidence that the Manchester terrorist had fallen under the influence of preachers in local mosques who had been saying some pretty unsavoury stuff about Jews, not in Israel and elsewhere. What can practically be done in that sphere of mosque scrutiny, of finding out what's going on, of coming down on people who are preaching or essentially are inciting violence and terrorism in our country?
Well, incitement to violence is already a crime, isn't it? So we just need to apply the laws that we have today and tell people this is not acceptable, and arrest people if necessary and prosecute them if necessary if they're inciting violence.
So, for example, one thing I think we could be doing is really reshaping the Charity Commission and having much greater oversight of charitable foundations, charitable organisations, using that as one way to try and clamp down on extremist financing and support.
Where there's extremism in the sense of anything to do with inciting violence or anti-Semitism, of that kind of thing and so on, it absolutely should be clamped down. It absolutely should lose their charitable status for anything like that. I agree.
Let me just push you a little bit further, because there's one thing Giorgia Meloni hasn't mentioned, but President Trump has, which is banning future migration from predominantly Islamic nations. Where are you on that?
We need to absolutely clamp down on immigration. And there is a difference here between Islamic immigration and other immigration. We've had no problems with Ukrainian, Hong Kong, South Korean, Nigerian, no problems integrating all those people. They become great citizens. The problem we have is Islam, where it comes and it wants to create Sharia councils, a parallel legal system, it wants to have Sharia finance in our systems, we want to have Islamophobia, law, Islamophobia code to prohibit free speech in relation to its own religion and this kind of thing. We don't get this with other areas, don't get this with other communities and other groups. We get it with Islam. Trevor Phillips, the former head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, said in 2016 in an article in the Sunday Times, we've integrated all these people, but the challenge of integrating Muslims will be the greatest challenge this country has ever faced. He said that in 2016. Right, 9 years ago. It's not got any easier since then. It's only got harder. What's happened in the country has only proven that he was right to say that.
Well, Tim, stay with us. I'm just going to bring in our panel, acting deputy comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and political commentator Kai Wilshaw. Kai, lots of people on the right of Europe at the moment. I was in Paris and Strasbourg this week talking with lots of politicians, speaking in the European Parliament. They're all now saying this is really the big challenge that is facing Europe, that unless they get their their arms around this issue of Islamism, or the Islamification, as they see it, of Western nations, we may not actually have nations as we currently recognise them in the decades to come.
Yeah, and let's be clear, that's fear-mongering. And yes, in the extreme example, and there are many extreme examples being targeted correctly by Giorgia Meloni, and perhaps we should be looking at that in the UK, but apart from those extreme examples, as you yourself said in one of your opening questions, there are vast swathes of Muslims in this country who abide by British laws and actually go about their days completely compatibly with British culture. Now, conflating Muslim culture and the culture of those who come here from Muslim countries with some of those dangerous practices that you outlined is a classic way of trying to demonise so many Muslims across this country as being extreme, as being violent, and using this terrorist attack as a pretext to introduce all these laws is ridiculous, frankly.
But you do recognise there is a problem with Islamism, right? And
yes, I do.
It's
I do, but as we know, it's... I mean...
You're much more likely to commit a terror attack than you would be if you're an atheist.
But to take the portion of people using the niqab and the burqa as an example, that was one of the sort of the headline of the Telegraph article that we're talking about here in relation to the Meloni laws. That's 3,000 to 5,000 people in the UK, perhaps. Of course, we see them much more in London because there's a much larger Muslim community here. Yeah. But to make such a huge issue out of this, when actually that isn't the vast...
Just one second, Kai. Poppy Coburn, what's your view? Is Meloni overstepped here, or is she in mood with the zeitgeist?
I always find it interesting when people invoke that we are a liberal society when anyone attempts to clamp down on incompatible parts of cultures that actually can be quite repressive. Because multiculturalism has already eroded a lot of things that people liked about liberal society. For example, we now have hate speech laws. That was something that was introduced because people were concerned about community tensions, and that concern over community tensions was considered more important than our ancient right of free speech. So it's always a trade-off.
That's such an Americanism. That's such we've never had. And that's
where do you think they got free speech? Right? Anyway, look. The point I'm trying to make here is that obviously walking around in a niqab is making a statement. I don't just think it's a religious thing. I think it's making a statement, which is I am different and I want to live my life differently here, and I don't care for the customs of this country. Now, I'm sorry, that is a problem, and it would be a problem if it's coming from any group that was foreign to the UK. Just because we're focusing on Islam is because it's the one that's most visible to people.
Tim did mention a list of countries at the outset that have banned the burqa and or the niqab. What's been the reaction in those countries to that move? I assume governments had no real problem doing it. Has there been a sort of backlash against it? Have Muslims protested and organised? I mean, what would likely happen here if we were to do that?
I mean, I think France did it many years ago, right? So, you know, they did it way ahead of us, and now you've got Italy. It'd be interesting to see what the reaction will be in Italy. Other countries have done it as well without any significant backlash that I've seen so far. So I think this is achievable. As he said, it's a minority of Muslims that do this anyway. You know, so not all Muslims are campaigning saying, I want all my women to wear face coverings and so on. So I think it's quite achievable to do this.